Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak?
When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal, Tim Verghese with us. Inside Nebraska, Rivals, and find Tim on Twitter at Tim Verghese. That was a money, that Animal Blundetto reference from The Sopranos after poor Steve Buscemi got jocked in the face. Tim, well played, sir.
Appreciate you. In all seriousness, I hope whoever did that to poor Steve is found, because that is a wonderful man.
I love Buscemi as well, but I'm scrolling through. Oh, there's a Soprano reference with Phil. So that was good. But you've been busy, dude. Great coverage as always with Nebraska recruiting, and a monster visit this weekend with David Sanders Jr. and a awesome commit for Nebraska football with TJ Lateef. Let's start with Latif. The last couple of Mondays we've had you on Latif Watch. Nebraska got the yes not too long after they took the series from Indiana with baseball, just a full news day.
And credit to Tim. I think last week he said it feels like a matter of when, not if.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
So Tim, breaking news before news. I love it. But what comes down to this yes for Nebraska with Latif? Not to go over old thoughts with this question, Tim, but I mean, Nebraska really beat out some pretty high names in this quarterback race, didn't they?
Yeah. They definitely did. I think, and you even go back and look. I think it's still on his profile. You know, Latif announced the top 6 back in January that didn't include Nebraska. That's around the same time that Glenn Thomas came in, and him and Marcus Satterfield started watching film. They kind of honed in on TJ as, the quarterback that they like in this class. There was another quarterback that kind of emerged, was Madden. We've talked about him a couple of times. But it kind of came down to those two, and felt pretty obvious that, TJ was the top target. And, pretty much since offering him, and, Coach Thomas has been in touch. I think Nebraska kind of had that top spot. Then that official visit kind of just cemented them as, the place for him. I think it checked every box he had. He was already pretty set on the development. He was already pretty set on the situation. He just kind of had to see it for himself. And once he did that, I think it just kind of all came together for him.
How do you convince a high-level quarterback such as Latif that, I mean, with all these guys, 4- and 5-star quarterbacks, they've had people telling them for years how good they are and how much of a difference maker they're going to be. How did Rural, Satterfield, and Thomas pull off the, it might be best for you to sit for a couple of years, because that's got to be a part of the conversation, knowing who Raiola is, knowing what that guy is going to be, that you're going to come in and compete, but a guy in Latif, a high 4-star, being comfortable with sitting for a couple of years if that's what ends up happening. How do you have that conversation?
It's tough. It is definitely tough. Some of these guys, they kind of realize as they're going through the process kind of what they need to work on, what they need to do. For TJ, for example, I think regardless of where he went, I think it was becoming obvious to him that he may have to sit at least for a year just to get that weight on, learn the playbook, do all of that. But more than anything, I think what helped Nebraska here is just his trust in Glenn Thomas's development specifically, and his relationship with him and Satterfield. I think for him, he stated, I want to play at the next level. Like, I want to play early at the next level. But he also understands that development is the most important thing, and if that requires sitting a year or two to develop and understanding, again, I think what Nebraska's done really well is showcasing just how many reps these guys are getting in spring, with those 3 sub teams. Danny Kalen was, technically like the 3rd string quarterback at this point. He's repping, like, he's got like first team quarterback reps, So that's the thing with Latif, is just like he's going to get that development. And I think that kind of helped Nebraska a lot.
So you're going to get better, and you're going to get all the practice that you'd get if you were a starter at an Auburn, a Colorado, a Florida State, a Georgia, an Ole Miss, at A&M, and Arizona. That's the list that Nebraska beat out. Ascent in the stream laid out the quarterback derby for him. Colorado really wanted this kid, didn't they?
Yes. More than anything, I think this is a big win over Colorado. I think I mentioned it on the radio last week too. but kind of felt officially that things were officially trending Nebraska's way when Colorado made a new quarterback offer, and they're on the road evaluating quarterbacks now. Their staff hasn't done a whole lot of on the road recruiting, and they're starting to do that a little more this spring, which kind of tells you kind of where the board's shifting for them. They're not as, like a program like Nebraska, it's kind of hard to see what the board is sometimes because they offer so many guys. But Colorado, it's pretty obvious kind of what their board looks like because they offer pretty much as soon as they move off a guy.
Spend a minute on Latif, if you could, Tim, with just what you like about his skill set. What does he do well? As you've covered a lot of signal callers, you've covered recruiting in different markets, but college football hotbeds. What is special, in your opinion, about Latif?
The special, I would say the accuracy, the touch, the velocity, just the polish he has as a processor and a thrower of the football. Kind of touched on it last week. Again, this isn't a guy that's going to light it up or as in he's not going to throw bombs on you necessarily, but he's going to get all of those throws you need made in the playbook. He's going to get all of those. He's going to read through, 3-4 reads. He can get through it quick. Footwork needs some work. That's probably the one thing I would say, probably little need some work on the footwork, need some work, just again, like I said, adding weight, some of that play strength stuff. But really like the way he sees the field. For a short, not a short, he's 6'2", before a shorter-ish quarterback. He throws over the middle pretty well. Good velocity, good touch, isn't afraid to just attack over the middle. Just a very safe quarterback, I would say. He's going to get you the ball where it needs to go, on that. There's the NFL QBs that do that, the Jared Goffs, the CJ Strouds, just guys that are consistently accurate and consistently, just know where to go with the ball.
It's Tim Verghese with us here talking some recruiting on Hail Varsity Radio. Make sure to find him, follow him on Twitter at Tim Verghese. That's Verghese at Tim Verghese on Twitter. And Tim, let's switch gears here and discuss the recruiting weekend. A big-time offensive tackle in David Sanders, another kid that plays offensive tackle, Broderick Scholl from down in Oklahoma. And I believe Clayton was also in town this weekend. What are you hearing about the guys that were in town this weekend? Obviously, Sanders being the big one. You've heard some pretty positive thoughts from him coming out of the weekend. Just what are you hearing regarding the weekend, the three guys that were in town?
Yeah, it was a good weekend for all three. I think for Nebraska was in a different place with all three. So with Clayton, this was Clayton's first time seeing Nebraska, but Nebraska's been interested. And this is a kid that, in my opinion, I think he's at the very start of blowing up. Like Nebraska offered earlier this spring, Wisconsin offered recently. While he was flying back from Nebraska, Florida State offered. So those big three in Florida are starting to get involved. I think people are starting to circle back on that junior film, kind of see the explosiveness he's got as an edge rusher. His first visit from Nebraska did a really good. His first visit with Nebraska sets the bar high. I think he's got official visits planned to USF, UCF, and Duke, I believe, as well. But kind of the way I put it in, I guess it's not out yet, but in a way, in a notes piece I'm putting up tomorrow. The way I've kind of put it is I think Nebraska's kind of set a bar that it's going to be really, really tough to match right now. A school like Florida State could, a school, like a big Power 5 program closer to home possibly could, but of the other schools currently in line to get an OV, I don't see it. I don't see them matching what Nebraska had to offer just in terms of just the experience and making him feel comfortable so far from home, and the development they've kind of talked about him with. Scholl, this was another one. Scholl's visited a couple times at this point. Nebraska earning this visit was a good sign. And then coming out of the visit, Nebraska's up there for him. I mean, it's one of those. Nebraska had ground to make up on Auburn specifically. I think they've done that this weekend. I think it's those two. A&M's still in it. A&M's pushing. Texas Tech still pushing. But kind of seems like it's coming down to Auburn, Nebraska. He's got an Auburn OV planned. We'll see if Auburn can get over that, or if Nebraska's pursuit these next couple of weeks is enough to just hold off the Tigers. As for Sanders, haven't talked with him directly. Talked to some people just coming out of the weekend about how he felt, and going into the weekend. I just the way it was worded to me from people close to the situation was, this is solely like not almost solely, but this is a lot of Dylan Raiola's doing, just a visit happening. Dylan's been recruiting or been in touch with Sanders since Dylan was committed at Georgia. He was peer recruiting Sanders to come join him at Georgia. They visited Georgia together. So they've maintained this relationship for a couple, for about a year or so now. And so these last couple of months, Dylan's just been directly in touch on, hey, come to Nebraska. This was something that I was made aware of pretty early on the beat, was like, hey, Dylan and David are close, and there's like a real relationship there. Just like that's going to be a national name that if Nebraska has a good year, they could get back in on. It didn't even take them having a good year. It took one spring game for, this to kind of come together. As far as whether or not Nebraska made up ground, I think Nebraska impressed, from what I've heard, enough that Nebraska's actually in consideration. But something I think people need to remember here is, like, Sanders has been regarded as this like top offensive tackle prospect for a couple years now. Nebraska just got involved in February. Some of these other schools, Georgia, Clemson, Tennessee, they've been involved for years. They've got like multi-year long relationships with him and his family. They're experts at this whole process at this point. They know exactly how to handle this recruitment, what they're looking for. They've stated on the record multiple times, Ohio State's been a program they're considering. And they've stated multiple times that distance is a factor for them. And it took 4 or 5 visits to Ohio State, including one last week. It took multiple visits for that family to feel comfortable with, hey, you know what? Ohio State could be like a legitimate destination for us. That's essentially what Nebraska has to do here now, is they have to be able to earn more visits, make them feel more comfortable on campus for them to have, staying power here. But that's the thing. Now we'll just have to find out, can Nebraska get him back on campus? Where do they stand compared to the top 6 he's had? And, what more can, is it Dylan and Donovan kind of taking this over? Is this, some of the linemen kind of, stepping in there and peer recruiting him? Like, what more can Nebraska do? That's what I'm curious to find out, just as much as everyone else.
Tim, about 30 seconds, bud. Timeline here. I look at the rest of the summertime: Clemson, Georgia, Tennessee, Bama, Ohio State. Then July happens. When does Sanders want to make his announcement?
He's kept it kind of fluid. He's talked about like August, September as a potential decision date. I know he wants to get it done either early or right before his senior year, just because he's enrolling early. He just wants to have it done so he can focus on, having a good senior year with his teammates. But yeah, that's kind of the timeline for him. But he's also, just from the read I've gotten based on the way he's talking about the top schools, Nebraska, being such a late new inclusion to that recruitment, he's certainly, and this is with any of these top 5-star type guys, any of these guys, they could end up, just pushing it till signing day. Like Sanders very much has, I get the read, this is a guy that could very much push this to signing day, or like whatever he commits to, if he does end up committing, before the season, it's not the end for him. Like that'll be a recruitment that'll go probably through the moment he signs. Schools tamper, but it'll go through at least even when he signs papers.
Tim Verghese, Inside Nebraska. Tim, appreciate you much. Great stuff today.
Of course.